Welcome back. It's day 2 of Sewing 101 Cosplay Edition. Yesterday we did this pinked edge seam, and today we're going to do the next step, which is a stitch pink edge. We're going to use our handy dandy complete guide to sewing book that I have here. Again, you don't need this book. I just have this because it was required for college. Now this seam is called the stitched in pink method. It's really similar to the one that we did yesterday. The only difference is that before we pink these edges, we're going to actually stitch that. Now, let's fast forward. We're going to get all the same supplies that we had yesterday. Honestly, you don't really need anything new for these because these are our basic seams. First thing you're going to do is sit down your sewing machine and sew yourself a stitch. You do not need a long seam allowance on this. For this stitch, I usually do about a 3/8. That's what I'm comfortable with. As a reminder, you want to sew very slow in order to keep your seam as straight as possible. Once we do that, we're going to clean up our fabric and go back to the drawing board. Now that we have our seam, we are going to press that. We're going to make it as flat as possible. We want to get this as clean as we possibly can. Once we do that, we are going to go back to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch down each side of the seam allowance. Again, going slow, trying to keep it as straight as possible so that we can then do what we need to do. We've done one side and now we're going to do the other side. This seam finish is the perfect seam finish for a fabric that ravels very easily. It is stabilizing the fabric so you can then pink it and clean up the edges. This is typically something that you would use with maybe a tweed or a brocade. We're having a lot of difficulties with the fabric. Now that we've stitched that, we're going to go back over to our mat. We have, of course, pressed our stitches into our seam. We're going to grab our pinking shears and we're going to do the same thing that we did yesterday. We're going to attempt to cut very gently right up along the edge of those stitches without going into the stitches because obviously that cuts your thread. Once we've done one side, we will turn it around and do the other side. Like I said, I don't know how to use scissors here. I'm just trying my very best. I find this to be very fiddly, but it's a great finish for projects where you need to have something that looks clean, but you don't have a lot of supplies. Pinking shears will cost you about $10 to $20 on Amazon, depending on which ones you want. Mine were only about $30 on Amazon. And there we go. That's everything that we needed to do to complete this seam finish.